Coming in at number 10, we have SCP-1591. So SCP-1591 is a big, beautiful, levitating glass star sculpture. It seems that at the core of the sculpture, there is glass in the shape of a star weighing around 12 kilos. This in turn is surrounded by further coloured glass panels weighing 12 kilos each. It's a heavy enough star. Here's a picture for those of you struggling to visualise, and really a picture is all you want here because you actually couldn't look at this SCP directly. It seems that SCP-1591 is kept in a room with 30 high-intensity spotlights pointed right at it. These spotlights need to be replaced monthly. Why? Well, SCP-151 produces a light of its own, which increases in brightness and intensity over time, especially in dark environments. When its light shines on a solid object, it at first becomes transparent and then slowly fades away, hence why the spotlight needs replacing as they slowly break down and stop working. Now, if a person is directly exposed to the light, they will lose the ability to speak and will try and run away. Unfortunately though, the light will destroy them, eventually making them disappear. It seems that SCP-1591's power was increased when the site was bombed in the World War. It seems that as time goes on, the brightness of the lights used to quell 1591 needs to increase. For example, if a 40-watt bulb contained it a week ago, by now it will need a 60-watt, so on and so forth. Each month when the spotlights are replaced, they have to get brighter. Now this SCP can only be stopped by bright lights, but eventually we'll run out of lights bright enough. When we do, it will start evaporating things on Earth, everything around it. I guess our only option is to take it to the sun. Okay, I'm a drama girl, so I will absolutely bite. I love the concept behind SCP-701, but it's deadly. Information coming here at number 9. SCP-701 is a 5-act play named The Hanged King's Tragedy. There are multiple copies of the play on lockdown in an anonymous storage site in the SCP Foundation. The observed behaviour surrounding SCP-701 is as follows. A group of people decide to do a play, The Hanged King's Tragedy, and as they start rehearsing it, they notice that the content changes every time they meet up, but they don't really realise it, just something weird's going on. As the play begins for its opening night, it's a sellout, a mysterious figure, SCP-701-1, appears on the stage at the end of Act 1. Now the figure is a tall humanoid dressed in black with a hood over its head. The audience noticed, but the cast do not. The audience obviously think it's part of the play, and they're enjoying it. He then continues to appear at intervals before officially coming on stage as the Hanged King during Act 5. Under his gaze, the cast then begin to kill themselves on stage until they're all dead. This is when the audience realise that actually this is no play. Riots break out in the audience, and if any audience member manages to leave, they do so in a daze, committing random acts of violence until they're killed or intercepted by members of the SCP Foundation. If audience members survive and are treated, they're often psychotic for the rest of their life. Some may have no memory of the incident. The reason this SCP could end the world lays in the fact that a VHS and DVD of the performance exists. Anyone who watches it would be prone to hateful and violent outbursts. One play that I don't think I'd enjoy. Coming into number 8, we have SCP-173. The sculpture. This SCP is all of your weeping angel nightmares come true, although we all do have to enjoy the rhyme of saying SCP-173. Absolutely none of us wants to be around this super creep though, I'm telling you. SCP-173 is on lockdown in a sealed container in Unit 19 of the SCP Foundation. The SCP itself has been known as the art piece, as it looks like some kind of ghoulish contemporary art sculpture from hell. Before we talk about the main concern with the SCP, I'd just like to highlight that it seems to seep feces and blood, which is pretty damn unsanitary. Aside from that though, like with the weeping angels in Doctor Who, you basically never ever want to close your eyes around it. Why? Because if you do, it will come closer and closer to you, and when it does finally get to you, it will snap your neck at the base of your skull. It's a killer, so no blinking. The SCP-173 will not stop until everyone who has ever blinked in its presence is dead. So next up, we kind of basically have the exact opposite of SCP-173 at number 7. We have SCP-096. So, I'm not going to show you a picture of SCP-096. Instead, you can look at me. You'll find out why. Often referred to as the Shy Guy, SCP-096 will get you. I guess they all get you in the end, don't they? SCP-096 is kept in a locked steel cube and is checked up weekly for cracks and holes. There can be absolutely no CCTV or video surveillance of any kind when it comes to SCP-096. Any images of this SCP must be destroyed. You can't even draw it. Why? SCP-096 is a humanoid-looking creature with long limbs. It has blank, pale eyes and its jaw can open 4 times wider than that of a normal human. Unlike with SCP-173, you can't look at it, ever. If you do look at it, it will freak out and kill you. Exactly how it kills you is classified. SCP-096 is noted for freaking out, crying, screaming, and becoming crazed when people look at it. Similarly, if a picture or a recording is taken, it will go crazy and kill. It seems that even looking at a photo or video of this SCP can kill you too. Exactly how? Once again, I don't know. How could it destroy the world? Well, if enough people saw it, hello, dead. Coming into number 6, we have SCP-1048. Okay, but like an SCP that looks like a teddy bear. I mean, that absolutely can't be good news, can it? And no, it isn't. SCP-1048 at first seems like a lovable teddy. Cute. It can move of its own accord, communicate through cutesy gestures, and loves hugs. Or so it seems. But it is all a ruse. SCP-1048 will often hug people's legs and draw childlike pictures and give them as gifts. It will even dance and jump, anything to make someone like it. But make no mistake, a lot like people who try hard in life, SCP-1048 is pure evil, something the SCP Foundation discovered the hard way. On one occasion, the SCP was observed having entirely replicated itself out of metal scraps. It seems that SCP-1048 has the ability to replicate using any given material, and for this reason, no teddy bears are allowed in the SCP Foundation whatsoever. Prior to the ear incident, this SCP was free to roam its holding site, but following the nightmare, the Foundation realized its true intentions. Oh, what was the ear incident? Let me tell you. It seems that SCP-1048 replicated itself out of human ears, removing the ears of all of the people around it within a 10-meter radius. A teddy bear made of ears. On one occasion, it appears that the SCP was able to abort a pregnant staff member's baby as it began replicating itself with baby parts. Honestly, a world filled with SCP teddy bears that pretend to be cuddly but then use deception and murder in order to replicate, honestly, it sounds like a dangerous world to me. Coming into number 5, we have SCP-1471. SCP-1471 will wreak havoc with your mobile devices. It's a free app usually named Mallow or version 1.00 in app stores. Now there's no listed developer and somehow it's able to bypass approval. Once the app has been downloaded, users won't see any icon or shortcut and they will not be able to delete it. They're doomed. The SCP will then begin sending images to the phone every 3 to 6 hours. The image will contain SCP-1471-A, a humanoid with a goat-like skull with black hair. In the first 24 hours, the images will show the figure at locations frequented by the individual who downloaded the app. In the following 24 hours, the SCP will show up at places recently visited by the individual. After 72 hours, the individual will receive real-time images of SCP-1471-A within close proximity to them. Those who have had the app for 90 hours or more will begin to visualize SCP-1471-A within their peripheral vision, or even their reflections, or both. From then on in, it's a downward spiral. Individuals will actually see the SCP, who will try and communicate with them in a language that they don't understand. So, how could this end the world? Well, almost everyone has a phone, and this SCP will send people mad thinking they're seeing a skull with hair and crazy eyes. While this SCP has never been reported to have killed anyone, with people losing their minds around it, it would be hazardous to mental health and productivity. People wouldn't get any work done in a best case scenario. In a worst case, they would cause accidents or perhaps even try and gouge out their own eyes, which, again, infections. Nightmare. Puss. This SCP will send you insane at number 4. We have SCP-055. This SCP is literally unknowable. It's unknowable by definition. Whatever it is, it makes humans forget about it. Information about it just leaks out of humans' brains. It's a self-keeping secret. It is placed at Site 19, although how the facility was built, we don't actually know. All we know is that Site 19 is 5 by 5.2.5 in meters. What am I going to do with this information? Like, nothing. nothing. We don't know what's in this space, and those who go on to investigate it forget. Research has been conducted on those who have been exposed to the SCP, and it seems that the only way of knowing it is by a series of yes/no answers. Now the loophole here is that while you can't know what it is or say what it is, you can know what it isn't. It seems one person question was asked if it was a sphere, to which they said no, but afterwards they didn't know what they were being asked, so not a sphere. Good. Great. What is it? Well, we don't know. To me, this makes me worried because it means we have no idea what it's up to. It could absolutely be plotting to end the world, and knowing the SCP Foundation, it probably is. Shall we start with a picture at number 3 to get the ball rolling? Sure, here it is. This is SCP-610, and it's an infection that causes serious and grotesque mutation. Hip hip hurrah, and we're back to pus again. Exposure to SCP-610 at first leads individuals to develop an itchy rash along with skin sensitivity. The rash will turn into heavy lesions and areas of what look like fresh scar tissue. These scar tissue wounds will then consume the whole body, and the process gets even quicker in warm conditions. It can take anywhere from 5 minutes in hot conditions to 5 hours in cold conditions, and it can absolutely destroy a person. The infected then no longer resembles a person and starts functioning at very high speed. The infected skin will start to grow rapidly and move of its own accord, with limbs becoming long and then branching out like roots, forming other fleshy limbs. Look! Without containment, they will continue to grow, and any living organism who touches it will become infected too. Infection is spread by touch, and sometimes even spores in the air. The infection was first noted in Siberia, and while it has been contained, it hasn't been destroyed. The areas infected continue to be so, and they are protected by SCP under the guise of military operations. If the containment was breached, then this infection could absolutely destroy the world. Coming into number 2, we have SCP-1548. Well, to me, this really is the baddie to end all baddies, except our number 1, of course. SCP-1548 is cosmic, and it wants us dead. SCP-1548 is a living star, an evil solar system moving towards us at breakneck speed. It seems this SCP was first discovered in the 1970s, with astronomers thinking it was simply another star, until it started moving towards us at increasing speed. Oh, and it's speaking to us via radio signals. It's a sentient star. Hurrah! So, what's it saying? That it wants to destroy all life in its path and it finds us pathetic. Good! Oh, and it also knows we're watching it too. How will it destroy us? Well, it seems it will steal us from our sun's orbit and then gobble us up in its fiery mouth. How long until it reaches us? Well, that's classified. Finally, coming into number 1 when you thought it couldn't get any worse. It does. It's the Scarlet King. The original SCP, or the original evil. The Scarlet King was originally named as SCP-001 until the SCP Foundation realized that actually he cannot be categorized as he is malice itself. Let me explain. It seems that the Scarlet King is a creature, to quote Jack Finch, whose sole demonic occupation is to usher in Armageddon and the end of all creation. Sure. The Scarlet King is the most malevolent entity in the universe and was born alongside the Tree of Knowledge, or so they say. The Scarlet King is as old as knowledge itself, and it seems that he's the overlord of darkness itself too. So basically, he's the devil. The actual devil. It's said that the Scarlet King is an elder god who has the power to conquer and destroy entire worlds, let alone civilizations. What's his beef? Well, he's declared war on creation itself, so not great. The SCP Foundation seems to think that any manifestation of evil is at the bidding of the Scarlet King. So a god as old as understanding, who's made it his sole purpose to end creation? I mean, it doesn't sound like a party I want to be at, does it? At number 10, we have SCP-2396. SCP-2396 is part of the Curious Mister series, although the SCP is the only Miss of the collection of 20. Also known as Miss Sweetie, 2396 is an 8-foot female humanoid weighing 22 pounds with natural pink hair. On her thigh she has a small tattoo that reads, "From Little Misters by Dr. Wondertainment," which is worth remembering. She needs to constantly be fed sugar, if not she feels great pain. The only thing is though, when she does eat the sugar, she starts becoming unbearable to be around, but just for males. She produces little hard candies known as SCP-2396As, especially when she's stressed. Now these appear in densely populated areas and are harmless if ingested by females, but if they're eaten by males, then the men are slowly turned into life-size hard candy. Sometimes life-size hard unicorn candies. Yay! Nay. These then become totally subservient to women who can order them to do what they want. Now, while this sounds both fun and kinda delicious, turning half of the population into hard candy zombies would be pretty awful, and humanity could no longer reproduce unless there's some kind of creepy, sweet, sticky half-breed plot hole, but honestly, I'm not sure I want to be any part of that, or we should mention it here. Not very PG. Ugh. Galloping into number 9, we have SCP-805. I actually recently did a Life's Biggest Questions video on SCP-805. It is a hollow wooden horse made from twisted wooden branches and roots. It came trotting out of a forest one day and started infecting people that touched it. The SCP is now contained in the Foundation and is allowed in and out of a secured paddock to graze and gallop, but all those who tend to it have to have all of their skin covered for fear of infection. Touching it with bare skin will result in a rash similar to that which only comes from poison oak. Only it will start turning greenish, brownish, and a person will then start slowly turning into a living wooden structure themselves. Only they won't be able to move, they'll be rigid and stuck like a wooden statue forever. The horse seems to be a cute, sweet lover of contact, but if it was to fall into the wrong hands, it could start turning people into wood one by one. And what if there are more poison ponies out there? Also, is it really a nice horse, or is it a scheming trotter? Okay, we've had fun with candy queens and ponies, but shall we get serious? What about a spider lady that will eat you alive limb by limb? Serious enough for you? Coming into number 8, we have SCP-352. Oh, hello old Baba Yaga. I also made a Life's Biggest Questions video on her. She is a horrifying spider witch. SCP-352 is class Keter, which basically means that she'll kill you and she won't care. Before she was captured in a woodland in Russia, she had already murdered an entire village that we know of. She now resides in a locked cell and is serviced only by robots. Presenting as a decrepit old lady, SCP-352 is covered in tiny long hairs that grow at will. If touched, they infect humans with an enzyme that breaks down their logical brains. They are no longer able to perform simple cognitive tasks. Some even display signs of euphoria. It seems that SCP-352 then bites. She uses her hair as a web and then dismembers and eats her prey. Oh, and she can also run really, really fast, which means if she ever got loose, we may have trouble catching her. She may have her work cut out in terms of ending the entire world, but given enough time to grow enough poison hair, you know, maybe. Coming into number 7, we are getting reals, the red spot of Jupiter, SCP-2399. Sounds like I'm in a bingo hall. SCP bingo. Worrying. Did you know that Jupiter is home to a terrifying SCP? According to the Foundation, 2399 is a massive, complex mechanical structure currently located in Jupiter's lower atmosphere. Whatever it is suspected that it is an antimatter weapon that creates space-time disruptions and causes havoc with a planet's atmosphere. It can be observed as a large red spot. Now, scientists have us believe that the Great Red Spot on Jupiter is a storm that has been raging 22 degrees south of the planet's equator for nearly 200 years, but actually it's an SCP. 2399 is thought to be damaged but has released drones to fix itself. It's thought that the SCP crash landed on Jupiter on its way to Earth and its rebuild is almost completed. Does this mean the SCP will continue onto our planet? What is the purpose of its mission? We just don't know. But we do know that it can be used to disrupt matter, and we suspect with our current available technology anyway, that it is indestructible to humans. Ooh, next up we have one of my favourite SCPs, but rest assured it actually could end the world. Anyway, if it wasn't so dumb. But it is! Coming in at number 6, we have SCP-3740. 3740 is a humanoid male that was picked up drunk outside a bar in Turkey. He'd gotten into a brawl and blew out the front of a building. It seems that the SCP is known as Asher God of the windswept plains and soaring skies, and does indeed have incredible cosmic power. For example, he can control birds, control air pressure, change temperatures. He can also create 500 km/h winds as well as create cyclones. Asher loves being worshipped and doesn't pose a threat to those he also believes are gods. He's very gullible. He's contained in a cell of the Foundation decked out as a luxury floor of a castle. He's quelled by regular feasts and drinking and often tries to woo those who dine with him. Foundation members must roleplay as fellow gods, which he believes. He also believes that he is in an Anglian chateau that he conquered himself. Now if he realizes that actually he is in containment and not in the company of fellow gods, he could absolutely lose it and use his power to break free and cause havoc on Earth. I still kinda love him anyway. Nikola Tesla, mate, what you got for us at number 5? Oh, it's SCP-2700. Our mate Nikola Tesla was for reals inventing a way to give the world free energy in the late 1800s. It seems that actually things could have been a little bit more sinister. According to the SCP Foundation website, SCP-2700 is a complex mechanical device believed to be a sophisticated directed energy weapon developed by Serbian physicist and inventor Nikola Tesla. It is possibly a particle accelerator. Now according to Foundation lore, in Tesla's journal he says that he was approached by a man who commissioned the machine in order to quote-unquote unlock science's final secret. Tesla claimed to have sourced material for the machine from multiverses and then created the weapon, the Teleforce. It was then brought back to our universe and his notes read, "I took the Teleforce back here. I took the death of existence back to my universe where it belonged. I have betrayed all life forms in this cosmos. I have betrayed our entire future." The death of existence. You what, mate? Doesn't sound great. Whatever SCP-27000 is, the Foundation says that it has been auto-programmed to activate in the year 2234, which actually the Foundation are really worried about. They think it will cause a YK-class event. Coming into number 4, we have SCP-2317. The seventh bride will break the tides, the moon no more will shine. There comes a day not far away, she'll birth the death of time. This is a prophecy about SCP-2317, and it doesn't sound great, does it? Yep, the prophecy does not sound great. So SCP-231-1-7 were a group of pregnant women, although 1 to 6 are now dead. The 7 women were recovered from a cult, and it is believed that they were impregnated with the children of the Scarlet King, aka the original evil. When the Foundation attempted to capture the women, some of the SCP died, so 231, 1 and 5 died giving birth to their offspring, and it seems that many people were killed in the process. Number 3 killed herself in the facility, and 2 and 4 died as a result of a procedure conducted upon them in captivity. 6 died trying to escape. Now 7 remains contained. It seems that the women inspire sympathy from those around them, and they can manipulate people into helping them try to break out. A horrifying procedure known only as 110 Montauk is carried out once every 24 hours by criminals locked up in the Foundation. This procedure has led to very heightened levels of staff distress. Whatever the SCP is carrying in her womb, it seems like it could be a world ender. Coming into number 3, we have SCP-3003. Let's cut to the chase here. SCP-3003 is an Earth-sized planet orbiting a star 208 light years away from Earth. The planet is infected with beetles that act as parasites on humans, allowing the beetles to control the population. The planet also contains a device that, if activated, could open a portal between SCP-3003 and Earth. So should that open up, hello people controlling parasites coming at us, trying to infect us. I don't like beetles anyway. Coming into number 2, we have SCP-2317. SCP-2317 is an old 19th century wooden door originally constructed as a basement door from a Massachusetts brownstone. These days though, it serves as a door to another reality. Cool. The only thing is though, in the other reality there is a 200-kilometer tall humanoid that is known as the Planet Eater, or SCP-2317-JK, who wants to, eat the planet, destroy the world. The good news is the Planet Eater has been contained by 7 strong ancient bones, but the bad news is that 6 of them are broken, leaving just 1 between us and unleashing the beast that wants to destroy the planet by gobbling it up into his big beastly belly. Some speculate that 2317 is an incantation of the Scarlet King himself. Okay, we are here, we're at the number 1 spot. What evil is awaiting us? Coming into number 1, we have Mr. Wondertainment. What we do know is that the elusive Mr. CW has created 20 SCPs, including Miss Sweetie, who was at number 10. Indeed, the man, if he is a man or even a human, created the 20 collectible little misters. I'll give you a quick run through of all of them. Mr. Chameleon. He is a sentient entity made of protons who can match its background. Mr. Headless is a headless man who can still perform tasks that usually require a head. Mr. Forgetful is a person with a peanut allergy. He's a humanoid with amnesia. Mr. Shapey is a transforming morphing creature. Mr. Soap is a humanoid that exudes a soapy liquid and can float humans in bubbles, which sounds kind of fun. Mr. Hungry is a humanoid who needs to eat 2,000 calories every 2 hours, if not he'll lose it and start consuming matter around him. Mr. Brass, I'd watch out for him. He's an automaton, a humanoid made of brass who was mistaken as a god by a cult before it ended up in containment. Then there's Mr. Hot, who has a weird ability to predict if a person has a child and also know what product that child desires the most. Really weird. Miss Sweetie, she's the only female, we talked about her, turning men into candy and then controlling them. Also creepy. Mr. Life and Death is an SCP that goes through the entire cycle of life and death every 75 minutes, which sounds exhausting. Mr. Fish is a humanoid just like you and I, except he has a head of a fish, which is super creepy. Mr. Moon is a man whose face appears and disappears along with the lunar cycle. Mr. Laugh is a clown that makes you laugh so hard that you can't breathe and you die. The discontinued and mysterious Mr. Red, I don't know much about him at all to be honest. Then there's Mr. Money, who trades himself for human possessions. There's Mr. Lost, he's a free SCP who simply wanders the earth. There's Mr. Mad, who actually does seem criminally insane. Mr. Scary, who, get this, is a partially submerged steel structure with a large saltwater reservoir, who corrodes people on sight. Mr. Stripe has the baffling ability to turn people into stripes. And finally, there is Mr. Lie, but we aren't supposed to know about him. Whew. So, what on earth could someone want with compiling this collection of life-size, living, breathing odds and sods? They all have a slight underlying theme of consumerism, and also how on earth can someone create an SCP? Let me know. Mr. Tesla did it with the help of a mysterious entity. Some speculate that Dr. Wondertainment is that entity, or perhaps could be an entity from the Church of the Broken God. Others speculate that Mr. Wondertainment is the creator of all SCPs out there of all time, or maybe is an incantation of the Scarlet King. And God, I've gone cross-eyed. This is simply too much to think about. Number 10. How do you know that you aren't an SCP? Like, seriously, think about it. You could be. Could you not very well be a clone, or a clone of a clone? How would you know? Are we living in a matrix? Questions, questions, yet no answers. Would the Foundation really be chill with so many world-ending Keter-class SCPs locked up in an actually kind of breachable facility? No, they would not. So in the end, it seems they created SCP-2000, a reality reboot, an SCP with the purpose of reconstructing civilization at the event of a K-class end-of-world scenario. The year it was created is classified, but the Foundation notes suggest that actually it's been activated at least twice in history, which means that we aren't living in the original world, which, you know, is worrying. The Foundation notes from Dr. Henrietta Eisenhower read, "If we ever have to do this again, please do not set the resume date further back than 20 years before the event. Not only can we piggyback on a lot of undestroyed structures if we do, but it will make continuity a lot easier to resume." What does that mean? Tell us more. It seems that the process begins with a core number of 5 million replacement humans who are then told they're part of SCP-2000, and these core humans then work together to smooth the reconstruction over. They make other replacement humans believe that they're living in the original reality, but we're not. My point being, if the world ended, like so many SCPs in this list could bring about, you would die. Sure. But you'd be replaced in a new world until you died in that world again. Coming into number 9, we have SCP-106. Does anyone smell like, I don't know, like something rotten? It could well be SCP-106, who smells like death and decay personified. His SCP presents as an elderly humanoid in a constant state of decomposing. Gross. It literally looks like an old rotting corpse, which I really don't want to see or smell, ever. 106 lays motionless for days and can hide in walls, floors and other objects, waiting to strike. When it does strike, it goes after 10 to 25-year-olds mostly, damaging their internal organs so they can't escape. It then pulls them into a pocket dimension, which to the outside world would look like a rotting piece of wood or a mouldy wall or something. It then devours its victims as they rot. Any physical contact between the SCP and any other matter, living or mineral, result in that person or item becoming corroded and rotten. A black mucus residue is produced that seems to assist the corrosion. Because of the nature of SCP-106, it manages to frequently escape containment, breaking out of its cell by blending into the walls and rotting it until it crumbles. This SCP could and would break and crumble and mold anything it touched in the world. Ugh. I can't get on board with mold. I really can't. Coming in at number 8, we have SCP-3007. SCP-3007 is an info hazard, which means that just by knowing about it, it can destroy the world. SCP-3007 is in the Keter class, and according to the Foundation, a containment breach of it would likely result in an XK class end of the world scenario. Good, fun. Okay, but what is it? SCP-3007 can best be understood by our mortal minds as a dream. A really bad dream. In this dream, whatever happens in the subconscious world happens to you in real life. If you're hurt in the dream, you're hurt in your bed. If you die in the dream, well, you're dead. The SCP is known as the Red and is said to once have destroyed an alien civilization completely, and now it wants to bleed out into our world. The only way to contain this SCP is to kill anyone that is aware of it, and most especially those who have dreamed of it, so, maybe be careful when you go to sleep tonight. Sorry about it. Coming into number 7, we have SCP-990. Is he trying to help or hinder? That's the question. SCP-990 is another dreamy creature. It appears in people's subconscious as they sleep as a Cold War era male. In the drawings and artworks created at the SCP, he is wearing a hat and has a kind of red stripe of light across his eyes. What does it mean? He is classed as Keter, obviously, although the Foundation don't actually know if the SCP is bad or good. He claims to be good, but you wouldn't you? Dreams in which SCP-990 show up tend to end with him making a grave future prediction. He'll warn the dreamer of a disaster which then inevitably comes true in their waking life. Sounds like a good Samaritan, right? Warning, get out of here? Well, the Foundation aren't actually too sure if maybe he's the one causing the disasters. Worse yet, he has made an end of the world prediction called 99007. He says that an SCP will bring about the end of everything we know, but that SCP isn't even yet known to the Foundation. When he made the warning, he claimed that the SCP is female and hasn't even been born. Remember the last part of this series? Well, some predicted it could be the child of SCP-2317. Coming into number 6, could this SCP end the world? Well, that really is the question, right? And as always, we really don't have too many answers, and I'm sorry about it. Meet SCP-3034. Now, I can't show you this SCP, but you can listen to it. Okay, so what you're hearing is a broadcast of unknown origin that has been noted 627 times since 1964. The broadcasts occur at apparently random intervals. The shortest known gap was 2 weeks, but the longest was 6 months. Now, if it's heard, Foundation members who speak Russian must respond in the same frequency with the message, "All is well." Why? Well, that's classified. What would happen if we didn't respond? Honestly, I dread to think. Could this SCP end the world? Well, probably. Coming into number 5, we have SCP-1782. Also a mystery is SCP-1782. It's a room measuring 42 by 45 square meters. It appears as an abandoned apartment complex located in Kiev in the Ukraine. The doorway to the room reads in Ukrainian 198D. Why? Well, by now I guess you should know better than to ask. The room continually changes. Sometimes it's a kitchen, sometimes it's a bedroom, sometimes it's a living room, and sometimes it's simply an empty space. Anyone Everyone who enters the room returns with a fear of holes, and nobody knows why, and I don't like tiny holes in the first place. Have I been to the room? Maybe I have. In the room, a faint sound of metal scraping on metal can be heard. On one occasion, a disembodied female voice could be heard saying, "Shakes me, makes me lighter." Curiouser and curiouser. Another time the room shifted and a man was being eaten alive by parrots without expressing any pain. What this room means and why it always changes is unknown, but the Foundation do not trust it. Neither do I. Tiny holes, once again. Ugh. Coming into number 4, we have SCP-409. SCP-409 is a large quartz crystal standing at 5 feet tall and 2 feet wide, so basically a crystal bigger than me. Big boy crystal. Shout out. The crystal is quarantined in a sealed granite container, and it must never, ever be opened. But if it was, then any single thing that comes into contact it would begin to crystallize. Oh, and if it's exposed to the air, the crystal will continue to grow and drop shards of smaller crystals that will also turn everything that touches it into, you guessed it, crystals. Unless you want your blood to crystallize, which I can imagine is a slow and painful death, I would stay away from this SCP. The only problem is you could touch one of its offspring crystals without even knowing it and meet your end anyway. At least the end of the world would be shiny, so, you know, there's a plus. Coming into number 3, we have SCP-682. SCP-682 has an omnicidal rage, making it a beastie that you don't want to mess with. It is a large reptile-like creature that literally wants to kill everything, but like, actually, everything. In its reptile-y form, it gets energy from anything and everything it ingests. It will keep eating until it's stopped, and the more it eats, the more powerful it gets. The SCP is a master of escaping containment and has to be submerged in hydrochloric acid to stop it from breaking free, although it has escaped 6 times. Despite being partially corroded by acid, the SCP can regenerate, and again, it wants you to die. Coming into number 2, we have SCP-2.5.2.1. No, I haven't gone mental, I just can't say the name of it. This SCP is an info hazard and can only be described or discussed in visuals. Any attempt to write or speak about the SCP will result in it coming to get you. Which, by the looks of things, wouldn't be pretty. So as I can't really talk about it, let me show you some images from the Foundation notes. So here's a picture of the SCP, and to me, it looks like it's made up from whirls of old VHS tape. Remember those? Here's a diagram explaining in visuals how you must never write, save information, or talk about it. Ugh. If you do, something about sticky tape hands? I don't know. What are you making from this? It seems like it can also escape confinement really easily, but showing it images seems to baffle it. I don't know if you guys are keeping up with this, but just keep looking. I'm just gonna keep showing you more images and really hope for the best, as I can't talk about it for fear of it wrapping me up in tapey hands and stealing me away. Also, there may or may not be like a little bit of a rapey theme going on here. It has a heart eye when it goes in for attack, which, I don't know, there's a lot to interpret there, and I don't like it. Get your tapey, sticky hands away from me, sir. Get out of here. Finally, coming into number 1, we have When Day Breaks. Okay, I really don't like this SCP because, ugh, gooey, sicky, gross. It makes me feel very, very vomity. So the SCP is often known as SCP-001, but as we know, there are many SCP-001s. This one seems to be an absolute world-ending nightmare. When Day Breaks refers to an SCP in which the sun gets really hot, like really hot, way hotter than it is right now, meaning that everyone on Earth begins to slowly melt until they become a fleshy goop. Now you'd think that everyone would kind of be melted and fleshy and dead, but no, we stay alive. We kind of become these fleshy, goopy zombies. We're like sentient, fleshy goo, which is gross and creepy, and I need to stop thinking about it because, again, sick. But that isn't the grossest or the creepiest part. You see, it seems that the piles of sentient goo can band together to try and coax those who may be surviving by hiding in the shadows and staying out of the sun. Now they can bring them out of the sun, get them melted, and then, like, take them in as part of their ooze. I don't like it. I'm actually gonna say a hard no to being a melted flesh monster. Let's hope that day never breaks.